Life works. Excellent. Hello. So we are almost at the end of day 2. I really appreciate all of the former presidents who have come. So as I was getting ready, Andy last year wowed us all by playing a saxophone and talking about his passion and wandering around playing some cool music. So I thought I might sing my entire presentation, but I'm not going to do that for you. I thought better of it because I didn't know how my voice would be this far along. So I tried to find a topic, though, that might blend my passions. Baseball, the Cardinals, medieval studies, fantasy computer games, pop culture trivia. I really couldn't decide on what topic I wanted to do, so I thought maybe another passion that I could talk about is something that I really love and work, and that's mentoring. It may not be as fun as me getting up here and sword fighting with somebody, but likely it's a little bit more relevant to this audience. So first of all, I wanted to take a minute to thank you all for coming to Indianapolis. It's been since 1960 since Central Association met here in Indianapolis, and we have a ton of stuff to do. Hopefully the dozen or so of you who went with us over to the track and rode around a couple laps at 180 miles an hour are still riding high from that adrenaline rush. For any of the partners and families who went with Tanya to Newfields yesterday to experience the Dahlia live, I hope that you found it as cool as I did when I went a few months ago. So I'm thrilled. Also, we have so many trainees here at the meeting. You are the future of our specialty and our organization, and I sincerely hope that you found this a welcoming environment. And I hope that all the medical students found the program directors panel that we ran yesterday as helpful as you embark upon all of your residency interviews. I also thank all the sponsors who came. We had more this year than we've had in nearly a decade, and so I really appreciate them coming to support the meeting. So these are the things that I plan to cover during the next half hour or so. I want to convey why this tandem topic of mentorship and sponsorship is so important for all of our success. We'll have some definitions, we'll highlight some key concepts and differences while talking about the models of mentorship and sponsorship and how they can succeed. And after hopefully convincing you of all of this, I'll end with a little bit of advice because I have a podium, I have a mic, and I have a gavel. And so that gives me the power to do this. So here we go. So because you all get CME for this, I have to relate my disclosures. I have no true financial conflicts of interest, although as I thought about it, that's not really true. I've had a K-23 Career Development Award, which absolutely helped my research and leadership journey. I've gotten a lot of benefits from being mentored and from being sponsored, as well as a lot of satisfaction of the results of some of my activities, mentoring others and sponsoring others. So all of those things, I think, have contributed to my overall well-being, which likely has made me a more productive person at work and at home. So likely I've been compensated, just not necessarily financially, from all of these things. And so maybe I do have a little bit of that disclosure. And hopefully the rest of you will too if you do these things. So why did I choose this as the theme for my presidential address? Number one, I've directly benefited from these things, and I see how critical they can be at various junctures, but really how few formal programs there are, and how often newly minted faculty and physicians can get caught in the clinical grind and really neglect this key contributor to their success. So there are issues at work that are impacting nearly all of us. Provider burnout we've heard about. Can I see a show of hands in a moment of vulnerability? How many of you in the audience have felt burnout, either creeping in or overtly? I know I have, multiple times. You know, there are increasing restrictions on what we do for our patients and how we can actually do those things to take care of our patients. Limitations and more requirements of paperwork. I don't know about you, but all of our obstetrics and gynecology volumes are increasing. More babies, more older patients, more complex conditions that all push us. And there's an increasing appropriate focus on what happens outside of work for us. Our family, wellness initiatives, things that can help prevent burnout. Our mental and physical health can all hang in the balance, and in the immortal phrase of physician heal thyself, if we're not in a good space, it's really hard for us to optimally care for our patients. Additionally, it seems it's difficult sometimes to even turn on the news, as there's just a lot of discord and screaming at each other going on. So I promise this is the only doom and gloom slide that I have. The good news is that data has shown that healthcare providers can totally benefit from mentorship and sponsorship programs to keep themselves on track. So let's dive into a little bit about how this happens. Let's start by trying to define some terms, because while on the surface they seem similar, functionally they're very different. And these terms, particularly sponsorship, have really emerged from the business world and become adopted. So mentor comes from Homer's Odyssey, where he was a wise friend of Odysseus who was entrusted with the guidance of Telemachus back home when Odysseus went out to the Trojan War. And mentors can be sponsors as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But mentorship typically is described as a longer-term professional relationship that provides support for a career and personal growth. The mentor typically provides advice, feedback, guidance, and sometimes some coaching, although that's a totally different thing defined, and I know Dr. Neal talked to us a little bit about that already. But really to help their mentees develop their careers. At its core, mentorship in medicine is all about guidance, knowledge transfer, and support. Sponsorship tends to take on a little bit more of a proactive role, however. Usually, a senior person uses their influence and their networks to directly nominate their sponsee, or sometimes called a protege, for high visibility career opportunities that can directly lead to their progression. Sponsorship's been described as really active advocacy for someone, and we'll dive into each of these deeper. So some key aspects of mentorship, it can be formal or informal. Some departments have programs that are set up, and some don't. And a lot of the best mentorship that I've had has really evolved informally. It's usually beneficial for both people in the relationship. The mentee gets something, but the mentor also gets something. And I've learned a lot from my mentees. And it can be a near peer or a senior-junior kind of a relationship. There's multiple different ways. And typically it's career or life development focused. And most people who have healthy careers have multiple mentors for different things. It's really hard for there to be a single jack-of-all-trades mentor for everything in your complex lives, right? It can be time limited, or it could be an evolving relationship over your entire career. And it can also be seen as succession planning for people. You can mentor junior folks who can take over for you when you get to retirement age. So a systematic review in 2006 really looked in depth at mentoring in academic medicine, and there was not a lot of primary literature, mostly opinion pieces. And in the years since, though, there have come out more survey data and qualitative work, mostly because it'd be really hard to do a control group in a randomized trial. We're going to mentor you, and you get nothing. I mean, nobody's excited for that. But I think that in general, some of the consistent findings that they found in these studies was that really just over half of most academic faculty stated that they had some kind of mentors. And in some areas of academic medicine, it was only as high as 20%. And it was really similar numbers for trainees. A lot of the trainees didn't feel like they were being actively mentored. Those with mentors typically have more job satisfaction, and it does reduce burnout in several studies. Can also increase academic productivity across the spectrum, not only for medical students, residents, and faculty. And that formal programs in various ways, shapes, and forms have been established. So I'm going to take you to the Wayback Machine. So if you look at the top left corner there, I've had a ton of mentors at my point. So look at that bright-eyed, optimistic kid, all dressed up in my Navy uniform after my first year in medical school at 24 years old, and expecting our first child. I needed a ton of mentoring at that point in time. So when I was in medical school at SLU, our admissions director, Mandy Comas, who was also an OBGYN, was extremely supportive. He checked in with me about career paths that I was deciding on OB. And then while I was in San Diego, sort of as you slide over to the right across the top, Lloyd West and Deb Arsenault were two of my senior residents who really made me feel welcome. First when I went there as a medical student, but then became clinical and life mentors over the years. They became really good friends. Deb actually delivered 2 of our kids, and she now has a vineyard, and her wine is part of my very small wine cellar. But Early in my clinical practice and academic career, I also ran across other people who provided really excellent mentorship. Pat McGann and Sunit Chauhan, who were pictured there, they knew me when I was a student as well in the Navy and helped me understand and acquire skills in presenting my research, particularly friendly and encouraging faces that I ran into here at the Central Association every year. And they provided some collaborative opportunities as well for both me and other people at IU. The picture of all the gaggle of folks at Lejeune, when I first got to Lejeune, there were 5 of us who got there just out of residency. And clinical mentorship, in addition to all of the other things, is really important when you're first starting out in practice. Often your practice will have a senior partner who's kind of been there and done that, who can show you the ropes. This group at Lejeune was an important thing as I reflected about how peer mentorship can really be impactful. At the end of the day, we came out of our offices, stood in the hall, and just talked about our interesting cases and asked each other advice. How would you take care of this? I've never seen this. Did you ever see this in residency? And I think that it's really important as you go and develop your career that peer mentorship can be really, really crucial for you. Carolyn Crowther, down in towards the bottom left, was a key mentor as I got more involved in the Cochrane collaboration, helping me figure out really how to balance my own activities while serving a more international maternal child audience. People like Steve Bodgewick in the bottom left-hand corner, who is our retired Dean of Faculty Affairs at Indiana University, gave me some fantastic advice and taught me how to say no earlier in my career with a greater yes. And that is advice that I've passed on to a lot of my trainees. It's good to learn how to say no as long as you've got a greater yes so that people don't feel shut down. Haywood Brown, who many of you in this audience know, has been really one of these things where a chance encounter. I was down watching a resident research day at UNC Wilmington when I was at Lejeune, and he happened to be the speaker and had ties to Indiana, and we got to chatting, and he's sort of been a nice mentor in the background for me, checking in when I would go to SNFM meetings and places, and it's nice to have people like that who are just sort of in the periphery, but always asking and encouraging you on what you want to do. I'm ever grateful to Bill Grogman. I first met Bill while working on the new Mom to Be project, and I have to admit, I was a pretty junior person at that time, and I was starstruck having read all of his papers. His calm demeanor, wit, and insights into all sorts of things in life instantly led me to just start picking his brain. And he was so gracious with his time and candid thoughts. We had many conversations about career development, career advice as I navigated that transition from early to mid-career. And he's still a friend and mentor, and I know most of you who know Bill will probably feel the same. I leave every single conversation I have with him smarter and with a better vision of what's to come. So mentors, this is a heck of a lot of people, right? Many mentors are really important for people. So as a mentee, there are a few key things to keep in mind, because I know we've got a lot of people who are early in their career, and there are things that you should do to help cultivate so you get the most out of these mentoring relationships. Some literature advocates that mentees should interview potential mentors before formalizing any kind of a relationship. And this can be mainly just confirming that your potential mentor is a good fit, personality-wise. They have the time and energy to help devote to you. Often mentees fear that senior people are just too busy for them. And while we are busy, ask them up front. It can be important. And most good mentors will recognize if they're overextended and will work with you to find someone who fits your needs. But managing up in this way and taking ownership of the relationship can really help make mentoring the most fruitful thing. Overall, communication is the key to a mentoring relationship. Open and honest communication usually leads to the most beneficial mentoring. Regular meetings, I think, are really key for mentees. It can be difficult when you're a student or resident who moves from rotation to rotation, but it's really important to have regular check-ins. And if your mentor is willing to dedicate the time, you should also set aside that time as well. Find a way to check in face-to-face if at all possible, even if it's just for 30 minutes before you both leave to go home for the day or have coffee in the morning at Starbucks. The frequency can be variable. Most people recommend checking in about monthly to start with, but it really depends on your goals and objectives and how you have that mentoring relationship. Formal mentoring programs that you may be involved in can often have scheduled check-in frequency requirements. But if you're prepping a paper or a new program, it may be really important to meet more frequently and run ideas by people more often. I often wondered why my chairs keep asking me for agendas for our vice chair meetings, but I think that having an agenda when you meet with a mentor is really important because it can definitely help set the tone and give the mentor actually a few minutes to prep and understand what you're going to be talking about. And finally, I think one of the main things is show gratitude, if appropriate, to your mentors. It can mean more than you know to a mentor. I remember the random notification I got at one point in time that I had been nominated for an ACOG Mentor Award by one of my residents, Jen McIntosh, jury at that time. And I was incredibly touched and honored. I can't start crying yet, so I gotta say that too later. But it also fueled my desire to continue to do mentoring and to help try to impact other people. It's important to reflect also on what you need. You've got to know yourself and your goals if you want somebody else to kind of help you bring those out. So, convey these to the mentor, because if I don't know, if you want me to help mentor you, but I don't know you want to be the editor of the Green Journal one day, it's really hard for me to help guide you in that direction. So studies on mentoring programs in both business and academic medicines highlight some of these key items that are really important for mentors. So if you're a mentor in your room, you probably understand these. But really, first and foremost, a good mentor needs to be able to listen and actively listen. This will help them truly uncover what the mentee needs and give them the best opportunity to give good advice and guidance. Don't really just ask them what they want to be, ask them how they want to spend their time. Because what you spend your time on will show them what is important. The focus should be really on the mentee's needs and not the organization's needs. It's really helpful to make sure you disentangle those things. This can sometimes be difficult, but if the mentor just keeps pushing a mentee to keep working on committees and more committees, it's likely that relationship's not going to last too long. So mentoring takes time. We're all busy, but be creative in your time, as I mentioned before. Use Zoom if you have to, if somebody's out of town, but really face-to-face is preferred. And a good mentor will really challenge the mentee to take some risks sometimes and push their envelope, push out of your comfort zone by helping open doors for them. It's also important for the mentor to recognize when perhaps they're not the best mentor anymore, that someone has sort of moved beyond and that relationship has to evolve. While there may always be a professional relationship, the person may not really need your mentorship anymore. If you've done your job, then they don't need your mentorship anymore sometimes. And this is particularly with research labs, when you need to move beyond your mentor's lab actually to become promoted and not have your mentor on every single one of your papers if you want to get promoted eventually as an independent scientist. So there's this survey of Johns Hopkins medical faculty in 2016 that I saw that came up with this figure that sort of lays out some of the thematic differences and similarities between mentorship and sponsorship. We're going to move a little bit more on to sponsorship now. And while they share a few key things like being a professional relationship that's mutually beneficial, based on communication pillars, and that you can and should have more than one, there are some key differences. And we've talked about how mentorship is focused on career development. Sponsorship really is focused on career